All right, today we are going on a journey, a real detective story, actually. We're on the trail of our earliest ancestors, a story that's a staggering 2 million years old. These were people who left behind no words, no books, nothing like that. So, how in the world do we find them? Well, let's put on our detective hats and start following the clues.
And this is really the heart of the mystery, isn't it? We're chasing a story that is so incredibly old, it's almost hard to wrap your head around. There are no written records, no diaries, nothing. So, without words, how do we hear their story? Well, we have to learn to read the clues they left behind in the earth itself.
Okay, to really get a sense of the scale here, just let this number sink in for a second. 2 million years. That's how long people have lived on the subcontinent. It's a span of time so vast it covers, get this, 99% of our entire human story. So, what were their lives like? I mean, who were these people? So, the name we give them is hunter-gatherers. And it sounds pretty simple, but their lives were anything but. To survive, you needed an incredible amount of knowledge and skill. We're talking a deep, intimate understanding of the land, knowing exactly which animals to hunt, which plants were safe to eat, and the precise moment the fruits would be ripe for the picking. So, where do you even start looking for clues to a story that's 2 million years old? Well, you have to start with the things that last, the things that can actually survive the ages. And that's not wood, it's not even bone most of the time. It's stone. Just take a look at these. I know, at first glance, they probably just look like a bunch of rocks, right? But they are so much more than that. What you're looking at are some of the very first technologies humans ever created. These are the tools that built the ancient world, and they've survived for millennia to tell us their story. It's really incredible how much we can learn from just a single shaped piece of stone. For an archaeologist, this is like finding a complete survival kit. I mean, these tools reveal a whole life. A life spent cutting meat, scraping animal hides to make clothing, chopping up fruits and roots for food, and even shaping wood to make things like spears. And making these wasn't just random luck. No way. It required real technique, and you had to think ahead. The most common method is called stone on stone. Basically, you hold the main stone, the core, that's going to become your tool. Then you take another stone to use as a hammer and you strike it precisely to chip off flakes until you get the exact shape you need. This was not just banging rocks together. This was intentional, skilled engineering. Okay, so these tools tell us a lot about how these people survived. But what about where they lived? Well, all the evidence we have points to one thing. They didn't stay in one place for very long. They were constantly on the move. So let's dig into why that was. So why were they always on the move? It's a really important question. And you have to understand, this wasn't just aimless wandering. Not at all. Every single move they made was a calculated decision. And it was all driven by the most basic need of all, survival. And it really boils down to 4 key reasons. First off, if you stay in one spot for too long, you're going to use up all the local food. Simple as that. Second, the big animals they hunted were always moving, so naturally, the hunters had to follow the herds. Third, different plants have fruit at different times of the year, so you'd move to wherever the food was in season. And finally, maybe the most critical reason of all, water. You had to follow the water, especially when sources dried up in the winter and summer. This map here shows us exactly where we find the evidence. We're looking at sites from what's called the Paleolithic period. That's the Old Stone Age. Now, if you look at those red triangles marking places like Bimbetka and the Kernel Caves, you start to see a really clear pattern. They are almost always located near 2 absolutely crucial resources, a reliable source of water and a good supply of quality stone for making those all-important tools. Archaeologists have a special name for these prime spots: habitation-cum-factory sites. Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, I know, but it just means they were places where people lived for longer periods and also made their tools. When archaeologists dig there, they find everything: blocks of stone, discarded tools that broke, all the little chips left over from making them. It was basically a home and a workshop, all rolled into one. But, this story isn't just about survival, tools, and finding food. The clues they left behind point to something much deeper. We start to see the sparks of culture, of community, and even of abstract thought. Let's talk about a real game changer: fire. I mean, this was huge. In the Kernel Caves, for example, archaeologists found actual traces of ash. That's the smoking gun, the direct evidence that these early people had learned to control fire. Just stop and think about what that meant.
Suddenly, you have a source of light in pitch-black caves, you have a way to cook meat, and you have a weapon to scare away dangerous animals. It absolutely transformed human life.
Of course, a huge part of survival was finding good shelter. And natural caves and rock shelters like the ones you see here at Binbetka, well, they were prime real estate. They gave you protection from the rain, the wind, the sun. They were a safe place to rest, to live, to make tools, and, as we're about to see, to do something truly extraordinary.
Because on the inside walls of these dark, protected shelters, they did something absolutely incredible. They created art. This wasn't just a home anymore. It was a canvas. They painted the world as they saw it, leaving behind a direct window straight into their minds.
And look, these weren't just simple stick figures or doodles. The paintings show a really incredible understanding of the animals they shared the world with. I mean, they're drawn with such accuracy and skill. You can feel the movement, the essence of the creatures. This is clear evidence of a complex mind, a mind capable of careful observation, of representation, of art.
So for nearly 2 million years, this hunter-gatherer way of life was the only way of life. It continued generation after generation. But then, around 12,000 years ago, the world itself began to change. And with that change, the entire course of human history was about to take a very, very sharp turn.
This timeline really helps put the scale of this shift into perspective. You see that huge chunk of time, the Paleolithic? That's almost all of human history right there, and life stayed pretty much the same. Then, just 12,000 years ago, a blink of an eye really, the climate starts to warm up dramatically. This kicks off a new era, the Mesolithic, or Middle Stone Age. And believe me, it would change absolutely everything. I mean, just look at the difference here. The before was a colder, harsher world. The after? It's a warmer planet. Those icy landscapes started to melt away, and in their place, huge grasslands began to develop. This completely changed the animal life. Now you had more deer, goats, and sheep. And so importantly, it also meant that new plants, grasses that produce grains like wild wheat and rice, started growing everywhere. And this brand new environment sparked a revolution, not just on the ground, but inside people's minds. With all these new grass-eating animals around, people started watching them, really learning their habits, how they bred. And that was the very first step toward the idea of herding. At the same time, they were gathering all these new grains for food, learning exactly where they grew and when they ripened. And right there, that was the seed of an idea that would eventually change the entire planet: farming.
So when you look back, this incredible 2 million year journey is really a story of resilience and of adaptation. These early humans mastered tools, they harnessed fire, they created beautiful, profound art. And when their entire world was turned upside down by climate change, they figured out how to change with it. And that, I think, leaves us with a pretty powerful question to think about. As we face our own changing planet today, what story will we leave behind?